Hello, my name is Brant. Today is the 10th day of July 2020, and I want to talk to you about the FCC and the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that took place here in the United States that eliminated what I call the local radio stations being owned by local owners of these stations. Part of it, the way radio started many years ago, first in AM in the late 20s, early 30s of last century, and then later on in the early 60s when FM radio began to take over. So what transpired in the Telecommunications Act of 1996 was that basically the Congress eliminated the cap on the number of stations that could be owned by one owner in the nation. There was a cap, is what I understand, and that cap was to eliminate what I call dominating the market. Now, part of this whole Telecommunications Act that took place was also where all the media attention was on AT&T, was to again to deregulate it and to destroy it in some ways to allow it not to dominate the media, the future. That is in the internet related, and also eventually not only AT&T but also to deal with television in the future also. So what happened was the FCC, and let's just be honest, folks, most people in the FCC don't know a damn about what they're doing. They don't. They don't. So they basically have others who have biases that are going to favor and want their legislation to be implemented into a Telecommunications Act of 1996. And so what happened was these guys listen to these experts, as they're called, are not going to tell the whole truth. So as you look at today, part of the issue with even phone service now is that AT&T basically doesn't want to provide service anymore to landlines. They made a criticism about 3 or 4 years ago that it was too expensive to do this. Fuck you. I mean, good grief. You made all that money a long time ago, and you don't want to put any more money in it. So they basically don't want to put any more money in the infrastructure of this. And I know here where I live here in Aiken, South Carolina, they're already pushing to get people to not only use mobile lines, mobile phone per se, but they're trying to eliminate what I call landlines. And they want, which AT&T bought out, one of the big satellite networks. I can't remember if it's Dish, Communications Satellite, or if the other one. There are two companies, but Dish is one of them. And they're now they're getting into that market, which is what they want to do. See, so they don't want to take responsibility for the phone service. And this is what all is about. It's about greed and money. It has nothing to do about serving the public whatsoever. It's about money and getting a service as best as possible, supposedly, and to quote unquote get as many people to sign up. Where I live at here, the internet service is Atlantic Broadband, which is based out of, I think it's based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's like number 10 or 11 or 12 ranked with broadband internet services in the United States. Naturally, the larger ones are involved. But anyway, I don't want to get off on that tangent either. But AT&T's gone in that market. And they're also into mobile phones, which there are only 4 companies in mobile phone now. 10 or 15 years ago, there was far more competitors. Most of them were regional players, some in the southeast, some in the northeast, some in the Midwest, some out in the west. And that's all been drawn down to 4 companies. Sprint is one, AT&T is one, T-Mobile, and I can't think of the last one off the top of my head here. It's orange color. I can't think of it. I'm sorry, but anyway, there's the four players. There are other players involved in this, but there are smaller players. And again, naturally, Walmart wants to get in a piece of the pie. And this is what it's all. Anyway, they can make money off this big time. So because there's very little. There's very little what I call hardware. In other words, there's infrastructure that doesn't have to be maintained. See, the towers are here and about. Build them, put them up, pay a lease on them to the landowner, and have them at what I call the closest proximity to where vehicles drive, if you'll notice that, and also on the highest part of the land, so they can radiate more power for phone use. It used to be that phones used to have little antennas on them, and that was in the 90s when I owned a cellular phone for a business, and that was, based upon getting good service, such and such was based upon that antenna, such and such, and also by the towers. That's changed. But anyway, I've gotten off the subject here. But I want to explain simply is how these acts that take place are not written. This is not for the people to find out the news, understand what's going on. And especially radio stations and newspapers used to give you local news. That's gone. It's almost gone, it favors the city councils, the county councils, even the state government that takes place here in South Carolina. So if I listen to a radio station, I get national news, which is maybe 3 minutes, if it's even that much. And they're just bits and pieces of information. And in the bottom of the hour is local news, either state of South Carolina or Georgia here. I live real close to Georgia, about 20 miles from it. So when I came here in '75, there were 4 radio stations here in Aiken. Aiken at that time was less than 15,000 people living in it. The city now has grown to approximately 40,000 people living here, and we have no radio station except one, which is a gospel radio station. And it's, you're not going to get any news from it neither. So what's transpired is none of us know what's going on. And this favors politicians. This favors those that want to do things that we won't know anything about. So what took place was simply this. The Telecommunications Act was passed in '96. Congress eliminated the cap on the number of radio stations one entity could own nationwide, and also substantially loosened local radio stations' ownership restrictions. So what transpired here is simply this. The 4 radio stations that were here, which were a group of 2 radio companies, small companies, family-owned, and they own an AM station and they own an FM station, and the same vice versa for the other company. Well, both those stations are no longer, the AM's gone. The frequency is gone. The frequency was 1290, and the other one was 1000. They're gone on AM, so there's no radio. There's nothing there. It's no longer being used. And the FM frequencies are 99.1, I think it is, which was moved, and the other frequency was 96.3. Both those stations are now located and owned by either Cumulus or iHeartRadio in Augusta, or possibly could be owned by Beasley Broadcasting Group, also here in Augusta, which totally owns almost all the radio stations in Augusta and dominates this area. So this is what's happened. No longer hardly anybody now can communicate on a public in an AM or FM band that is quote unquote not part of a corporate owned monopoly, and that's what it is. It's a corporate monopoly, and So what happened simply is that the Telecommunications Act allowed them to, quote unquote, have less competition. No competition. So there is elimination of the news local. And we're talking about a city of 40,000 people, and we're talking about a county that's approximately 125 to 140,000 people live in. And Augusta is a city of approximately 75,000. That's being generous, probably less than that. And the total population of Richmond County, which is where Augusta is over, I think, close to 200,000 people. And then there's another county called Columbia County, which is also over 100,000 also. So what's transpiring is people are no longer getting their news from a local source. The newspapers here, there is a daily paper here. You pay $1 for each time you get it per day. Is basically maybe 10 pages at the most. They've cut back. A lot of it has to do with advertisers. A lot of it has to do simply is they don't have as many people keeping up with what's going on. They don't have people out there reporting. And so there's no competition at all. The other thing I've noticed in corporate radio is that there is hardly any local companies that broadcast on radio anymore. I'm sure a lot of it's too expensive. And most of the broadcasts you do get are from national corporations like say Chick-fil-A, Home Depot, Lowe's. But these are all syndicated advertisers. So they pay a big bundle, but they're broadcast all around, not only regionally, but nationwide. So you could go to one station and listen to it in California and then one here in South Carolina, and basically the ad is essentially the same thing. So there's nothing difference there. So what they've done is eliminated people from even making local ads because it's probably too expensive, because they're owned by a large corporation. So they're not interested in playing with you with dilly-dally here. They're also cutting their own throat. They're so stupid. You know, there are others that have been bought out because they can't make it. Clear Channel was one of them, and Citadel Broadcasting, another major corporation. Both these were two major another ones. There are only two left now. Okay, and so now there are other players. Don't get me wrong. There are other players. Some are owned by Christian organizations. One I think is owned by the Mormons. I'm sure that the Catholics are involved also, and they're on their own radio stations too. And the Catholics own a shortwave facility down in Alabama, which broadcasts on shortwave. So, and they have their own television network, and the same thing essentially. There are stations like on the shortwave band in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm trying to think of it right now. That is basically a Christian radio station, and they have 4 transmitters that broadcast 100,000 watts on the shortwave band. And let's see what that. Let me just think of it. Anyway, I'm getting off digress a little bit. So what I posted here is a station. It was a pirate radio station here on Facebook that was eliminated by the FCC, and because here it is, you're not allowed to broadcast because the big boys don't want you to broadcast because you're not playing in the same ball field. Now, so the radio station near Knoxville, Tennessee, was closed down. They paid for their own equipment. They paid for it. It was confiscated. People say, well, that's not right. They're not playing by the ball by the government. Well, government is owned by corporate deals, folks. This gets real. There's no competition. None. And so what takes place is simply is you're not getting any truth anywhere. You got to look for it everywhere. And the internet was a hope for people, but that's being closed down by the people like Google and YouTube. They've been bought out too, because the government allowed that to happen too. They allowed it. I mean, we're seeing something that's destructive for everything. It was about what this country supposedly stood for, which was freedom. That if you had something to say, and if it wasn't good enough, if, say, for example, on a radio station, you go out of business because you know it wasn't good enough. No one listened to your radio station. You see, you have the responsibility as a radio operator and a station to tell the people the truth. And you're not doing it. You're lying to the people. All because of making money. And it upsets me. And I've watched this. You know, I enjoyed radio when I was a young kid. There's still radio stations, don't get me wrong, but the broadcasting is no longer done by a disc jockey. There are hardly any disc jockeys anymore. There's no news group at all in the radio station anymore. They don't have to do that when the FCC requires them to do that, but they don't do it. And then, like, for example, here in there's a television station here in Aiken County, and it's been here since the 1950s, basically. I don't know what particular year. You can tell I'm upset. And it's going to merge with another television station over in Augusta. So their offices are going to be closed in North Augusta, which is across the border. And people say, well, that's no big deal, such and such. Yes, it is a big deal because it is registered FCC in South Carolina. It's a South Carolina television station. So now it's going to merge. See, this is what's going on. This is all corporate deals, you know. So another television station in Augusta are going to merge with this station also. They're going to merge and be in the same building. This is ridiculous what's going on. And I'll say another thing simply that upsets me. It doesn't happen here, though there is a Spanish Christian station here, not in Augusta but elsewhere, that broadcasts in Spanish. There are not as many Spanish people here. But the point simply, you came here in this country, you need to learn English, period. If I went to Mexico and I was going to live there, I'd have to learn Spanish. That's the way it works. And people say, well, that's kind of old, such and such. Yeah, well, this is also divides people, folks. So, anyway, so what's happened simply is that there are a couple of radio stations I can pick up that are still somewhat locally owned. One station is about 20 miles south of here, 25 miles maybe, and there's another station about 20 miles north of here. Both are mom and pop type of organizations. The one in north of here, this is FM. At one time it had an AM station, but it sold it. And the station south of here is AM and FM. So what's transpired here is the elimination of any free speech. And pirate radio simply is that they were broadcasting, paying for everything, so they had to pay for the electricity. They were using equipment that basically they wasn't going to be able to broadcast. They probably couldn't broadcast no more than 15 miles, what I would call a circular deal. So in other words, they wouldn't have a round part in their station. Antenna would be up and had power and it may not even broadcast that much. It may have been only 10 miles. So it didn't have much of it's not a threat. It's not a threat. How can it be a threat? So, and it's just a sad predicament we're in. And it's all corporatism, all greed, everything to do with that, to eliminate Oh, we don't need this guy. We don't need this guy here. We don't need a disc jockey. We don't need this, such and such. So it destroys. That's why you don't have any jobs in this country. Because corporations come in and they basically eliminate the competition. That's all they do. How many grocery stores are left here in the United States? How many? I know here that Bilo is hanging on by a thread. It already filed for bankruptcy 10 or 15 years ago. You have Food Line. You have Publix. You have Walmart. And I think that's it. Oh yeah, there's their independent grocery store. Also here, high-end grocery store. But as you noticed, that Whole Foods is gone. It wasn't here in Aiken, but it was in Augusta, and it's gone. And another one also that was selling what I call organic foods, it closed up early this year. So they're all gone. So it's not because even poor management a lot of times simply is. It's that simply is grocery business is a tight business, folks. It's probably 4 to 5% profit margin in it. Okay, it's not a large profit margin is there. So that's why they a lot of times close their stores if they're not productive. Anyway, I'm rambling again, and I didn't mean to do that. But I haven't had a video here in a while, so I thought I would ramble about this and talk and share and maybe educate some people out there to understand why, in fact, most young people don't even listen to radio anymore, and I don't blame them. It's a joke. And most of the news talk radio stations are syndicated people. You know them. And so like Rush Limbaugh and all these other people that are involved in it, and it's syndicated. So again, one or two, a few people have the opportunity to broadcast again with, you can broadcast to 400 or 500 stations. Cumulus, I think, owns approximately 1,200 radio stations, and which is the second largest, and iHeart probably owns a little bit more than that, and that's it. Clear Channel's gone, and Citadel Broadcasting's gone. And Citadel was a merger with another company. You used to have ABC owning radio stations, CBS owning radio stations. I don't know if NBC owned them or not, and I think even Fox may have owned some radio stations, but that's gone. If there are, they're probably based either in New York, Chicago, and LA in the metropolitan areas. It's not here in the South per se. Okay. Have a good day. Hope you enjoyed, and I hope that you'll give me a thumbs up in what you enjoy. Thank you.